I did my bachelor's degree in Regina, the University of Regina, and then I did a master's degree and a PhD at the University of Toronto. And then I had postdoctoral research money to do some studying in the classics department at Harvard University. It was pretty exciting. It was exciting to shift a little bit from philosophy into classics and study ancient Greek literature and culture. And it was also exciting to be at Harvard because it's such a center of North American academic world. I was always a very keen student, I think. When I first came to university, uh, I wasn't that involved in the academic studies, like doing my homework, but I was very excited by the ideas. So I went to class periodically, uh, but I was always very engaged by it. And even when I wasn't really wrapped up in doing the homework, I knew that I was very attracted to just the experience of learning. And so it took me a couple of years, I would say probably 2 years or so, I sort of fiddled around. And then I got more serious, and for the last few years, I worked very, very diligently at my studies and found that very rewarding. I had been teaching for about 8 years in the United States at a quite a good school, in the philosophy department at Penn State University. And so it was very professionally a very powerful and prestigious department, but it wasn't a very nice place to live. I thought it was a small town in rural Pennsylvania, and I didn't like the culture much. I was very anxious to move back to Ontario because I had done my PhD in Toronto. And when a position came up at Guelph, that seemed very exciting to me. I knew a number of people in the philosophy department here, which I think is an excellent department. And I thought it would be great if I could come back here and teach at this school, which I thought was very good, and also live in Toronto, which I do. And so I came back because it offered me the perfect combination for a happy life. Mostly, I generally work with two groups of thinkers from the history of philosophy: the European thinkers from the 19th and 20th century, so the thinkers behind traditions like existentialism and Marxism and so on, and then also the ancient Greek philosophers Plato and Aristotle. And the question I'm really interested in is exactly the one I just mentioned about myself: how to make a happy and meaningful life. And I generally think that there are four things we need to consider there. One is, what are you going to do? What are your life projects going to be? What are your careers going to be? That sort of thing. So those activities that make up your center of your life, that's obviously crucial, and it's important to decide that well. But then I think there are three other things that matter a great deal too. One is, uh, have we as individuals developed ourselves in a healthy enough fashion that we can carry out our plans and function effectively and feel happy and balanced in our situations? So I've been very concerned about that, about the what's involved in developing a sort of mental and psychological health, and the problems that we have when that doesn't work out. A second issue is broadly moral value. What are the things that we hold up as the highest goods that we feel like that we should answer to in our lives? And people will disagree perhaps about what those things are, but it seems to me an essential dimension of our lives that we recognize something higher to which we answer, moral value or something like that. And then a third thing that shapes and complicates our lives and our meaningfulness in our lives is the dimension of the political world uh, the political world that we live in. The structures of government have a great deal to do with shaping whether our environments are supportive or inhibiting, and so on. So I've looked at those things: the development of mental health, the relationship to moral value, and the nature of government. I've looked at those as sort of the essential dimensions that have to be handled well to make it possible for us to be happy and successful in pursuing those life activities that are fundamentally satisfying. And I think that the Greek philosophers and the European philosophers are particularly insightful in revealing to us what it takes to have all those different dimensions be handled well, or equally to understand what it is when they're going poorly. I consider my career to be about the best thing that could happen. From the point of view of my own personal development, the ongoing study of these thinkers and these ideas is incredibly enriching. But also, and also I like to be able to write about that and develop my own thoughts and share them in professional context. But also the experience of teaching this stuff is pretty fantastic, because I find that it's almost always the case that when students study philosophy, they experience transformative insights. And so it's an amazing thing to teach a class, because you can almost see it happening in the classroom, that you start talking about a certain issue or a certain idea, and you see people start to like notice it and think, oh yeah, that's right, or that's important. And they're not just little temporary ideas. They're ideas that sit with people perhaps for years, and they gradually carry bigger and bigger importance. And so that's why I love this career. I love teaching, because it's so rewarding to me to be able to appreciate better what's important in life, but it's also so rewarding to be able to share these things with other people. I do also play jazz guitar, that's right. And jazz guitar, I guess next to teaching and writing about philosophy, jazz guitar is the most satisfying thing I know. Music, like ideas and like moral values and so on, music speaks to something very deep within us, I think. So I think it's very important, in order to have a fulfilling life, it's important to cultivate a significant relationship to truth. You need to study and know things. To what is good, you need to develop good values and relate to them. But also beauty is kind of what makes life worth living in a significant degree. And playing music and being involved in music is extremely stimulating and satisfying. Again, for both because of what it offers me, but also the ability to share that with other people is so satisfying. And jazz is a particularly compelling and interesting medium to me because the jazz group is largely improvising when it plays. So people in a band will start off with a certain tune or a certain musical idea, but the nature of the music is, okay, we have this idea, now let's just improvise around it and see how we can make music collaboratively based on this. And so nobody really knows what the other players are going to do, so you just have to listen, and you have to be very adept at playing your own instrument to be able to participate in this dynamic dialogue. But so in addition then to the power of beauty that the music brings, the actual performance is such an experience of communication and high level sharing with people that it's very interpersonally satisfying. In fact, then my experience of playing jazz is quite closely related to my experience of teaching philosophy. They're very, very fulfilling things. Yeah, I do have some advice for students. I guess I have two or three things that I would think of. I mean, the first is the very basic one. I think that whether people are in school or out, but certainly if they're in school, students should be powerfully oriented by trying to develop a rich and fulfilling life. And it's important to remember that a rich and fulfilling life involves a lot more than just thinking about a way you're going to spend your day to get a paycheck. And of course we need to find ways to pay the bills, but that should not be the first concern. That should be something you figure out in the context of more basically having determined how you're going to live a rewarding life that's going to satisfy you for the next 60 or so years. So I think that's the first thing. And then in terms of the pursuit of particular studies, I think students, when they get involved in a program, they see a list of requirements. People should be careful about that and not think that the requirements that the university hands out are just a checklist to be filled off, but it's rather that the university has tried to give you sort of advice on what sorts of things are going to give you a full degree. So when you approach those things, those requirements, you should approach them intelligently. When you think about your electives, when you think about taking courses in the arts or the science or whatever, don't just check off something, but try to think, what would it be worthwhile to study here, and try to use those requirements to build on your own a strong education, because nobody else is really going to do it for you. And then the last thing I would say is, and this advice might go counter to what some counselors say, but I would also tell people not to be in too much of a rush to get through it. So yes, you can finish a degree in 4 years, and it's good to do that, but there's also nothing wrong with taking more courses, and that the time in university can be the most life-changing and fulfilling that you will have. So I think rather than rushing through an established program, it's good to take the time to actually get an education and take some responsibility for that yourself and finish when you're ready. I took more like 6 years to finish my BA, and I'm happy I did that. So.